over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. We're starting a little bit late, and hopefully we'll get a little bit longer at the end. So, good morning, everybody. So we have got a very exciting subject this morning. We're looking at the role that innovation can play in solving the housing crisis, and we've actually got some really exciting news this morning. I don't know if you've seen it, it was announced about 6 o'clock this morning that Sekisui Homes, which is one of the world's largest and most innovative Japanese house builders, has invested in Urban Splash's modular housing business here, together with Homes England. So they've entered into a £90 million deal with the government and with Urban Splash. So that's, I think, a huge endorsement for our modular housing business here. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that. So let me introduce the panel. Stefan Webb on my left. Stefan leads the design, development and delivery of projects across the Future Cities Catapult. He works on creating new ways to understand infrastructure capacity in cities and the relationship with new development. And before joining Future Cities Catapult, he worked for the Greater London Authority on spatial policy, strategy for the Thames Gateway and the Olympic legacy development. And next to Stefan, we have Darren Rodwell. He is the leader of the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, and they have established a pioneering new development company called Be First. And they have very ambitious targets. They plan to build more than 50,000 new homes and create 20,000 new jobs over the next 20 years. And then Mark Farmer. So Mark Farmer is the author of the 2016 Farmer Report, which really challenged the construction sector to modernise or die. I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that. He's also trustee of the Ministry of Building, Innovation and Education. And then Tom Eshelby, at the end, is the Managing Director of Stelling Property, who after 20 years in real estate decided to stick his neck out and set up his own development company, which manufactures for its own off-site volumetric construction. So we have a great panel. So let's get straight into things and just talk. Is Sekisui Homes really such a big deal for innovation in housing? So, Mark, do you want to kick that one off?
My personal view is yes, I think it is a big deal. It's potentially a seminal moment for the UK home building industry. I think what's significant about it, and it's been a long time coming, it's not something that's happened overnight, it's been probably over 2 years of investigations by Sekisui into the UK market and looking quite hard at the existing off-site sector, development sector, to understand where they might land in a way that adds value, in a way that would suit their business, but also to really drive the UK housing market forward. So it's been a long time coming, but I think what's significant is the fact that it's scalable. It's scalable in relation to the capital that will sit behind it. It's scalable in relation to the technology and innovation that comes as part of the package, because the one thing that Urban Splash will be tapping into will be the know-how and the knowledge that Sekisui bring from having operated for nearly 50 years in Japan as one of the leading home builders using manufacturing, and not just manufacturing, digital manufacturing. So the key thing, and in the theme of today around technology, this is a technology-led opportunity to drive home building in the UK. And really importantly as well, I think this is not about cookie cutter, poor quality architecture. This is combining technology, innovation with high quality design. And I expect the product offering that is going to emerge out of this joint venture to be really interesting.
So it really is exciting. I mean, just to give an idea of scale, apparently they are larger than our 8 top house building companies, so enormous, and they have built millions of homes. So huge know-how. So, Tom, any thoughts?
it can only be a good thing from my perspective. I'd say that the sort of lake of knowledge around modular housing in the UK is still relatively nascent and quite small, and that can only massively improve it, and that will then feed into supply chain, all of the processes around it. If it also brings it into the spotlight and demonstrates that you can do this in a sort of highly engineered, manufactured way that creates brilliant buildings, that's good for the public consciousness. And then finally, it's really good to see the government put their money where their mouth is, and you know, frankly, I wouldn't mind a piece of that myself. So I'm off to see Kit next week, and might raise that point with him.
Yeah, and Darren, I suppose, I mean, you prefer it to be in Barking, but presumably it is good news, and you would be very happy to have something like that in your area.
Yeah, I mean, we're already probably more advanced than any other local authority in the country when it comes to what we're going to do with modular build. And in fact, there will be a factory in Barking not too soon. So I can't say, because obviously that's more important what government announcements are, because we actually deliver on the ground. I mean, one of the things I find a bit annoying is government does this outside of working with local government. And actually, any build that's going to happen has to happen with local government working in partnership with the private sector. So the fact that, you know, I'm not only the leader of Barking and Dagenham, but I've got housing and planning for London. Well, London's got the biggest crisis in housing moving forward, and I hear the same time as you guys, and it is exciting, and I am pleased for doing it, but we should be a bit more joined up, because actually that's the only way the whole sector is going to move forward.
So you're saying that there should be more collaboration between government, local authorities and private sector to really get this moving?
Absolutely, because that's what we're doing individually as local authorities. Like I say, we've set up Be First to develop a programme and a relationship with private sector that would actually benefit my residents as well as London, as well as the country. What seems to be still too disjointed is what government feels it needs to do and what we're doing at a local level, because we're the only people that really know what's going on at a local level. So it's how do we make a better communication, because actually, as I sit here today, I'm talking to the Chinese, the Australians, the Japanese, I'm talking to the Americans. You know, it's not like it's new, but it's just a bit frustrating for me as someone who delivers, who wants to deliver, the fact that there isn't a more joint up piece of work for the UK to benefit.
And the whole point about the digitalisation of this process is it should therefore lead on to a more collaborative kind of approach. And if, certainly from my perspective, from the off-site world, the local councils, the local planning authorities need to be aware and champion what we're doing and the constraints and the benefits that go with that, in order that we don't get Kit and his crew championing it, not them, and then us having a go underneath that. So
Yeah,
I would support
and
that.
I think it's especially right when you come to planning, because that's where the people who are developing, you know, modular housing, they then have to go to the local authority planning committee, who may not actually understand what's going on. I mean, I don't know if you see that, Stefan.
So yeah, I think the opportunities here are very large, but will the planning system kind of compute and buy into the kinds of output, I guess, that these companies will be delivering? I think what's important with Sekisu is it's with Urban Splash. Clearly, they've got a good pedigree when it comes to design quality, but equally, will it have the impact of a company like Catera? So this is still just looking primarily at the construction phase. Companies like Catera, you may have come across them in the US, they look at the whole of the property life cycle. And I think the planning system plays a key role in that, and I think we need to ensure that we keep our ambitions high and think about how can we digitally transform the whole of the property life cycle, accepting that the construction part is the most costly and important element of that, but we need to keep that big picture in mind.
Yeah. Anyway, I think, you know, it's great to have it announced this morning, because otherwise I was looking back to Future PropTech last year, to a similar session, thinking actually what has changed. And Mark, your modernise or die report was a real wake-up call the construction industry, but I mean, it's getting on for three years ago. I mean, as far as you're concerned, you know, are we making progress? Are we making enough progress? What are you seeing?
No, we're not making enough progress, if I'm brutally honest. I think what's happened in the last 2.5 years is there's probably been a lift in the awareness level of the problems that the construction industry is facing, particularly around skills. It's not cyclical anymore. This is a structural long-term decline that we're looking at, and there's a need to urgently explore different ways of delivering, whether it's off-site manufacturing, whether it's digital design, part automation, augmentation. There's all sorts of ways in which technology will enable us to be more productive, and fundamentally it's a question of productivity. And if I look at what's happened over the last 2.5 years, again, I would say central government have done quite a lot, actually, in policy terms. There is absolutely, in taking Darren's point, not all of that has landed. You know, the rubber hitting the tarmac, there's a disconnect at the moment in terms of some of the policy initiatives. Government have put their money where their mouth is when it comes to these social infrastructure programme and things like the school building programme. Prisons are going to move towards manufacturer-led approaches to construction. What's the private sector done? It's been pretty variable, if I'm really honest. There's a few leaders out there who are truly leading from the front and innovating and and driving a path forward. But there's many, as you probably expect, in a sector that's very reticent to change, who are just waiting for others to take that lead and probably, fail and see what mistakes are and learn from that, and then pick up at some point in the future. But my concern is that there is a real urgency to this. I said in my review that we probably had a decade to start really reforming how we deliver as an industry, including home building, and we're, as you say, nearly 3 years into it, and I'd say we're behind schedule if we're going to really accept that modernise or die challenge.
It's interesting. I mean, the real estate sector is not known for being, in the cutting edge of change and innovation. But I mean, what does the panel think? Is there anything particular about the real estate sector, the construction sector, that prevents it from embracing new technology and innovation? I mean, we talked about experimentation. We're not very good at experimentation. We don't invest in R&D. So is there anything about the sector that's stopping this happening?
I think you could argue that we look and focus a great deal on the planning system, and many people argue that the planning system's broken, but it's in no one's interest to fix it properly. So actually we talk to some of the larger volume house builders and their kind of strategic land agents, and they don't want a more transparent and efficient kind of land market. They don't really want a more usable planning system, because that would mean more competition. And I think part of what Mark's getting at is how government needs to, unfortunately, create those conditions where there is an easier planning system, there is easier to start up MMC companies and enter that market and create better competition, because at the moment some of the bigger players aren't moving. Perhaps Sekisu will make some of them wake up and really properly invest in R&D, but at the moment there does still seem to be a great deal of reticence to innovate, because they're quite comfortable with making margins out of an analog system.
And Tom, I mean, you took the decision to, which probably wasn't that easy, to set up your own your own company, off-site construction. I mean, why did you do that? What did you think you were going to do?
Good question. I suppose it was a decision made in two parts. First of all, the easy bit was, let's set up a development company that harnesses off-site housing. So let's go to the market and find partners who will deliver volumetric steel modules, so the sort of Lego bricks that go to make the buildings. Sounded a great idea, and we did so. And if I'm brutally honest, it was a pretty disappointing experience all round. It was disappointing from brand. The DNA of a lot of those off-site companies comes from kind of on-site construction cabins, from caravans, from sort of short-life homes, prefabrication. And that's not a terrific starting point for creating a kind of aspirational home or product of any sort. So having dipped our toe into that market, it was so mediocre in many ways that we thought we might have found a bit of a gap in the market for that vertically integrated developer, whereby we buy the land, we build the buildings ourselves, we manufacture as much as we can in the factory, we do the on-site work that we need to, and then we own those buildings afterwards. So we've got that sort of full circle. And you know what, we're only a year in, so I couldn't sit here and say that we've demonstrated that this is the new kind of zeitgeist, but it does feel like there's an awful lot more control over our own destiny. And I think really the key going forward, leaving aside some of the kind of gripes that naturally go around the planning system and so on, is to demonstrate that not only is this a way to solve a housing crisis, which makes it sound like, well, if it's a big enough crisis, then this is a good enough solution, and actually to completely reinvent that and say this is the way it should be, this is the kind of all the potential that goes with that digital creativity allows us to build something that's better than that sort of slightly hackneyed Edwardian terraced house. And I think we let ourselves down in the MMC world, the modern methods of construction world, when we resort back to looky-likey brickwork on the outside of a building, which is actually made of glass-reinforced plastic, because you're harking back to a sort of sentimental, outdated world. What we should be doing is looking forward to a much kind of brighter way of doing things, much more control. How's that, Darren?
Being the fact that I still live on the first big-scale housing project, Homes for Heroes Becontree Estate, which is 100 years, 16 different designs, I find there's nothing wrong with something that makes people feel warm to something. I think one of the biggest problems we've got in housing at the moment is we have been very experimental and it's been rubbish. Unfortunately, people have died through experimental ideas. So what we need to do is find what the values are that are right, how you want to glaze it at the end and everything else, I don't really care. What I do care about, though, is the spaces that we are creating. And I sit on these panels at the time and I keep being told our planning is broken and now there's this problem, that problem. Well, report that I saw only yesterday, Mark was at an event with myself and I was reading the report on the way home. There's 700,000 homes that could be built today through planning that's already been given permission. In London, that's 260,000 homes. So please don't come and talk to me as someone who's a local representative saying that I'm not helping you make money. Because 9 times out of 10, I'm helping you make money because you're doing it to my community in a way that my community don't want it. So my job is not to help you make money. My job is to help you understand what my community really wants. And, I have to be honest, since the war, we have not got it right. I was hoping in the 21st century, with local government getting involved, by using the companies that we're doing, by actually being the full circle. So in my council, we own a company that will work within the framework that the council, the members who represent the community, says you have to work within. So that means it's good methods of construction, modern methods of construction. We're looking to be, as I say, no other council's done more than we have when it comes to this work. I mean, we talk about the government. Well, actually, we were the first council in the country to build the largest school out of with Portakabin Group. It holds 2,500 kids. It's a fantastic facility. Within 12 months, it was open. From start to finish, it was built in modular. So
Darren, do you think are you getting it right?
Do I think I'm getting it right? Well, working on the basis that we don't have any planning issues, you ask my community. It's not for me to say that. I mean, we got the highest vote of any party in London ever at the last election. We're the poorest borough in London. So my job as a leader is to serve my community, and I respect people's decision to do what they want to do, and I disagreed with what I was listening to earlier about everyone wants to be a billionaire. Quite frankly, if money is all you care about, then actually that's a problem in society. So what we've got to do is start wondering about the values that we do what we do and why we do it. I mean, I think we're the most tech-savvy ever. We've got more communication devices than ever before, but you can't have a conversation with someone in the street anymore because of the situation we've inherited, where we've allowed the technology to supersede the interaction of people. So we need to build places that work for the local community, who will then not object to what's being proposed if they can see it benefits their life.
Well, I have a question. I mean, I hear that modern methods of construction are going to provide cheaper housing at scale, but will those savings actually get through to the buyer, or will they be absorbed by the developer? And how long, I mean, what sort of scale do we have to be building at for those savings to actually come through and to make a difference? I mean, Mark, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I think the idea of MMC being seen as cheap worries me somewhat, because that is reinforcing a stereotype. There is undoubtedly an efficiency and scale efficiency play here in terms of if you're investing in fixed costs of factories and machinery and technology to build homes as a manufacturing process, then undoubtedly that fixed cost is diluted the greater your output. So don't get me wrong, there is an economic relationship there. And the biggest danger in all of this is if you do harness those scale efficiencies, that actually what happens in our land market is that it residualises to a higher land value. And that's a big concern I have if there is any issue about trying to translate scale efficiency to the end consumer, even through cheaper sale values or cheaper rent. The way our land market works at the moment is residualisation. So the only way you're going to unlock that is to bring modern, efficient, technology-led approaches of production and construction coupled with non-open market value land models. And if you can do that, then actually you have a chance of reforming the end outcome for the consumer. I completely agree with Darren's point about the thinking more about the consumer and the community. You know, part of what's happened in the home building sector and in the wider development sector is there's now been a breakdown in trust with the public at large, and I think part of putting that right is going to be about understanding more holistic value and societal, social value. And I know these are all, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but I think seriously the development market has got to get to grips with understanding what putting something back into a community really looks like, and not just keep bidding up land, because that's where it's all going wrong at the moment.
And it gets back to actually the comment that Tom Bloxham made in the press statement this morning about the Sekusui deal, that we're talking about homes and not units, and I think that's important. So I think we're running out of time, so I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. Has anybody got? We have a couple of questions there.
We do have roaming mics that can come to you. We'll take the first one there and then second at the front. But just before we do that, there's one on the app that we've had, which I'll put first, from Jitin Mitra. Many of the success stories in offsite are with manufacturers who have partnered with or are owned by house builders. We've heard of Urban Splash, there's also Legal and General, there's others. What's holding back the success of manufacturers selling directly into the market? Anybody got any thoughts on that on the first?
Procurement. So as soon as you introduce a transactional interface between a manufacturer and a land-led developer or investor, then you have a procurement issue. And it's quite clear to me that whether it's developers, housing associations, even local authorities in some instances who, unlike Darren's authority, are not necessarily that progressive, you have this procurement model that does not work for off-site manufacture. Off-site manufacture needs early engagement, it needs best value to be assessed on the back of benchmarking, not through bidding to 6, 8, 10 different parties and then running through a planning process where you then retrospectively decide how you're going to manufacture something. It does not work. So that's why the success stories thus far have been vertically integrated platforms such as Urban Splash, and Berkeley will be a similar model when they get up and running next year.
We found it really hard to find a contractor to work with us, because the moment we mentioned off-site housing, they priced in risk, which was around their own uncertainty. It just made the whole thing unviable, so hence we've gone to that vertically integrated model.
Okay, the dreaded P word, procurement. Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Hi.
Do you want to just introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're from?
Bert Broadhead from Alteris. So the debate today has been very much focused on volumetric house building, so delivering entire homes through modular means. Where do you think, or is there a role for kind of modular component parts, kind of integrating traditional build methods with offsite?
My view is absolutely, yeah. So I think there's A new definition structure has only recently been published by government with 7 categories of modern methods of construction, and modular is only one of them. It's category 1. There's 6 other types of manufacturing and actually digital site-based construction as well. So it's not just about off-site manufacturing, it's what you do on site, but certainly hybrid componentized build, I think, is actually in many ways already being done. So a lot of construction, particularly apartment building at the moment, is increasingly using component or sub-assembly level pre-manufacture, which might include utility cupboards, plant rooms, risers, bathroom pods. There's all sorts of ways in which traditional construction and off-site construction can come together. So I see it as a broad spectrum.
And I think there's interesting ways of such as custom build homes, igloo regeneration are doing lots around that, which gives more of a kind of local feel to it. To some of Darren's points, you can have a mix and match of kind of different styles and approaches, but behind it, I guess, behind the scenes, it is kind of modular components.
And there's a sort of purity of purpose of doing it all in the factory off-site, but instinctively it also feels like taking that kit of parts to the site is a much more efficient way of doing it. It's like putting the bed together in your bedroom rather than outside and then carrying it in. It's just a sort of easier gig.
But the people that are going to do the most in that is local government. If we're forward-thinking enough, we're looking, as I say, already at a modular factory, but actually we're looking at different stages, whether it be part or full, you know, what we're looking at. And bearing in mind, I come from Dagenham, it had the largest car plant outside of Detroit. We know how to do, you know, sections throughout, you know, the whole process. So we see this as a local authority. We give the supply credence, because that's the biggest issue. Will people buy the product? Well, the fact is, yes, we will. It's our product. And it's how we manage it after it's been built as well, which is also a problem. And again, you know, you go back to the past, we had a situation when the borough was first built, or 2/3 of it, with the Becontree estate, everything was the same. There was district heating systems in there was everything. It was too much for poor people, so they turned it all off, and that all went by the by. But the truth is, the fact that you'd done it on scale and everything was the same was great. From the 80s onwards, they then changed that, and we had 40 different types of boiler that you could have in the house on the same estate. And it was a ridiculous situation that we had a bigger warehouse for the kit than we actually needed. So we've gone back, and that's why this whole modern manufacturing is the right way to go, because you can actually then start understanding what you'll have over a longer period. But it is local government that's going to make the real step change. And what we need from government, though, is the money. Because they're the ones with the purse strings, we're the ones with the innovation.
Okay, time for one last question. Yep.
Hi, Richard Kennedy from Project Stackhouse. I think the industry is nearly there with modular and modern methods of construction, but where I see the biggest gap is around access to land and innovative business methods to accessing that land. What are the panel's thoughts on that?
Rubbish. There is so much land. What we've got to do is stop flipping it for ridiculous amounts of money. So if I take my own borough, yeah, the mayor right now has the biggest piece of land in London under his control. The Mayor of London does, right? So, hold on, let me fix here, right? I then have the second largest amount of land. Now, I'm not stopping anyone. What I'm doing, though, is trying to make a future for my community in a way that's sustainable for my community. What we do have, though, is, again, we have 700,000 homes that could be built today that is being banked for profit. So you're putting profit over people. That's why I'm not a billionaire.
So I agree with everything you say. So how do we stop?
Oh, that's easy. Again, I'll give government that answer. I'll tell you what I'd do tomorrow. CPO powers, but it'll be a CPO where the local authority says, I've got a partner in the private sector and an RSL that could build out that site that's been derelict, that's had planning permission for far too long, and we would buy it at a cost that we determine before it got planning permission, because it's obvious that it's not being built out. So what would happen is you wouldn't have speculators coming in and making 4 times the land value, because what's happening, and I've seen it in my own borough, 3 housing associations went for a piece of land. It quadrupled this piece of land's value. It's a ridiculous situation. So we need to be out coming together as partners and say, sorry, We're not allowing that now because you're damaging the marketplace. You're actually damaging communities by doing this.
What about taking the land value completely out of the equation?
Well, again, that's for the private sector and how we work that through. But I think as it stands at the moment, if we could come in with what I call a super CPO, where the local authority shows that it's leading this, so it actually brings in mixed tenure, and how we do that is something that we would need to negotiate with government in a way that works for government, because they get very nervous about me saying things like that. So I'd be more than up for that. But that's because I'm red, so
Okay.
I would
We
be.
actually haven't even got to talking about small and medium-sized
No,
buildings,
absolutely.
which is an issue, and how we give them access, because they're just not even getting a look
Well,
at it.
I think from personal experience, I think probably the way forward for the smaller modular providers, rather than the kind of huge behemoths, is to team up with the HAs and the LPAs, where they've got the land, we've got the ability not just to sell modules, that's kind of dull, to deliver the entire building, the entire development project and everything turnkey, so that's then a better product for them to operate, but they've got real control over that output of cash, because that's kind of key to them, because we'll take responsibility for delivering it. They've got the land. We struggle to access those big chunks of land. It has to be said, Darren, not all boroughs are quite as forward-thinking as yours, and so it is a slightly different world outside of your fiefdom. But that's a way forward, I think, for the SMEs.
So it's back to the collaboration
Yes,
word again, isn't
absolutely.
it? People
Yeah,
actually working together
yeah.
to get some of this innovation through. So are we out of time?
That's probably a good point to draw it to a close. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you to the panel. That was good. We could have carried on talking, but for next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or later today. Thank you.